Many trailers that are on the side of the road that have lost a wheel are usually down to the fact that a bearing has failed. It's good practice to check a bearing. To do this, you need to spin the wheel and make sure it sounds good. There's no grating or horrible noise, and get hold of the wheel and shake the wheel. If there's play on a bearing, with taper roller bearings they can be sometimes adjusted depending on the condition of the bearings. With sealed bearings they need changing immediately. This is a hub from an Ivor Williams and it has a sealed bearing in. Sealed bearings are also used by Knott and Alco amongst others, and they're getting more and more popular in the UK. This one sounded a little rough when it was turning, but inside all the grease is coming out the bearing where it's got too hot, and to prevent problems in the future it's getting changed immediately so that the customer doesn't have a problem in the future. First of all, there is a circlip internally which has ends there and there. This needs removing. To do this it's good to have a pair of circlip pliers. However, some people do manage to do it with screwdrivers. The circlip pliers go into two eyes and pull the circlip out like so. This is not the easiest job because you have to make sure that the circlip is free and you need a decent pair of circlip pliers. People using screwdrivers tend to work one edge and lift one edge and spiral it out to lift it out. That can be tricky to do. Once this is removed, the easiest way is to press the bearing out. To press the bearing out, you need to mount the drum so that the circlip end is down. We have large plates that give a hole, whereas it can be mounted on the beams or packed up. That sits there. This is a bush we've had turned up that will centre on the bearing and push the outside edge out, and then it will need extending up to squash the bearing out. This is extremely simple to do, but we do understand that not everybody has a press. We will show how to do it without a press shortly, but this will push the bearing straight through until it drops onto the floor. Once that's removed, the drum will have a large hole to take the new bearing. Give it a quick wipe round with a rag to make sure that there's no debris in there. New bearing sits on top. Once the bearing's sat on top, that needs pushing in. I tend to use a square plate to spread the load to start off with, and push that in until it sits level on the top. Once that's in nice and square, you need to push the outer ring of the bearing. To push the outer ring of the bearing, some people will get the old bearing and grind it a slight bit thinner. we have special press tools that are designed for the job, and these are just slightly undersize on the bearing, and allows you to press the bearing all the way back, pushing on the outer shell. Once that's up to pressure, once that's stopped solid, remove the tool and check that the bearing is clearing the ring, the slot for the circlip, and is all the way back in the hub. Once this is all the way back, the circlip then needs refitting. And this is a bearing ready fitted. We do understand that not many people have a press, so we're about to show you another way of fitting a bearing without a press. However, it does involve welding equipment. Right, the second way to do it without a press but with a welder, this needs to be used if a bearing is broken and there's only the outside edge left and you can't really chisel it. There are reliefs on this particular hub there that a punch can go into, a punch can slide into and try and drift the bearing out, but you spend more time slipping, and with the large surface area of the bearing grips so hard you don't get it out. So to make it easier, what you do is you run a weld on the inside of the bearing itself, all the way round. When the weld goes on, the weld is hot. When it's hot, it's expanded. As it cools down, the weld shrinks and it pulls the bearing smaller. It gives you a lip to hit a punch on to knock it out, and it gives you less friction because the outside of the bearing has shrunk with the weld. So I'm just about to weld around this hub. Once the weld's complete and on the bearing face itself, it can't go anywhere near the hub. It should look like this, and it then allows you to get the punch and with gentle taps, doesn't really require a hammer this big. This is a bit clumsy because it's shrunk and there's no pressure. It literally drops out as easy as that. This is a process I also use on taper roller bearings for getting the outer racers out where you're struggling to punch them out. There is another way I'm going to show you to get it out. I have a special tool for doing it, but it can be done with all sorts of packers and bushers and old bearings. And we'll show you that process. Then there is a process of putting it in, and I will mention a third process of putting it in that you can do at home, but we don't have the facilities at work. As I mentioned earlier, it is possible to drift these bearings out, but with the large diameter of them it is extremely difficult because there's far too much friction and forces required. So the third way of removing this is to draw it out. The way that I'm going to be doing it isn't exactly brilliant. I used to have a large tube that fitted over this that made life easy. Unfortunately, this tube's gone missing with not being used, so yeah, it's not going to be the best. All you need is a piece of threaded bar and some spacers or washers. You put the threaded bar through. I'm using the same tool I use on the press tool on the back. This can even be done with long bolts. This plate will do to start off with, because that covers the hub there. This can be done using nuts and standard threaded bar. However, this is part of a proper tool for fitting bearings, and has a bearing in the front face that reduces friction as you turn it. So as I'm tightening these up, it's pushing the bearing through to the front face a bit. You can see that the bearing has pushed in and it's getting close to the outside edge. We now need to make space on the front. As I say, I used to have a tube, which I currently can't find. Right, I'm using 4 equal size sockets to stand this on. Now that's tightened up, that can be drawn. Now there's a socket on the back so that I can hold the back nut. I can finish drawing it out with a few more turns. Because this is held with 4 sockets, it will all collapse as the bearing drops out. But as I say, a large piece of tube used to work brilliant for me. And that's the bearing out. The same process can be used to fit it, which I'm about to show you. But at home there is a trick, but we don't have the equipment. The equipment is a freezer and an oven. If you put the drum in the oven and the bearing in the freezer, the drum expands as you warm it up, the bearing shrinks, and the bearing can be dropped into the hub. I won't be showing you that, but I will quickly draw it back in using this tool, which is the same as using a threaded bar and a few spacers. Right, now we're going to draw it in. I've set this up. I've put a plate across the back edge to draw it to, a plate across the front. I'm going to draw it up till it hits the bearing, the nose on the front of the hub. Once I've got it there, I'm then going to use a tool to push it inside. So this should wind in reasonably quick. Now this is drawn in fully and level with the end. We then need to remove this and use something to push the outside edge of the bearing like we did with the press. Again, I'm going to use the same tool that I used with the press. So I need to loosen it all off until it stops like so. And removed. The bearing is all the way back past the circlip again. Again, fit the circlip and the drum is ready to go on. That is the 3 ways of changing a sealed bearing. To buy your bearings and other stuff, please visit our website, and we have most bearings on stock.